Hey guys, what's going on? This is Brad from the Ad Army, and today we are going into a new segment that I'm going to be doing, which is my pick five. So, this is just going to be me basically picking techs that are either budget friendly or maybe going to be generically good just for the meta game that we're going to have. The my pick five will focus back and forth on if it's affordable or not, but this is just morely me looking at the game, state of the game, and suggesting what I think would be good. So, without further ado, let me get into it. So starting off with my pick five, this one's supposed to be, pretty fast. These videos aren't supposed to take too long, and I'm trying to get through it quickly so that you guys can see if you have them or if you need to. So first, starting off, my first pick is going to be the one on the thumbnail, and that's actually going to be Contact C. So Contact C is a very interesting card. I do think that of all the techs here, this one is actually very affordable, but it's usually the one that's most looked at the least, as Contact C is an amazing card that you guys don't know, allows you to summon itself to the opponent's field when they do a special summon, and effectively they have to either fusion, synchro, link, XCs with that monster as material. So Contact C basically forces your opponent to have to utilize it as a material. So I just wanted to explain that. So effectively, Maxi was, the thing that started off the entire C family, and Contact C is like our, new way of looking at it. I don't think it's that good in terms of like to Max C, but Contact C is an absolutely fantastic card for one specific reason, and for the metagame I am assuming is going to pop up, is that since Age of Overlord will drop by the end of the month, this is not something that I was going to recommend for that format because I do think it's going to change a lot. However, I do recommend Contact C for the current format for a few reasons. Now, with the loss of Arise Heart on the ban list, the format's kind of is going to open up a bit. And I do think in order to deal with the decks that still exist, you want something that's a little bit different and a little bit more unique, because this is going to be a very short format before Age of Overlord exists for us. So we have this unique format for about a month. I do think that we have something interesting here with Contact C, in that what you're able to do is effectively stop a lot of the decks, because a lot of the decks are somewhat restrictive. They need to have the generic outs to it, which is usually going to be link monsters. I think Contact C is actually fantastic for the matchup against Branded, as I do think Branded Chimera is the best deck to face against Unchained. So I do think that is also, just a really good thing. Also, I do think this is helpful for tier, because people will be experimenting with tier again now that Arise Heart's banned. I do think you can take advantage of them summoning something out like the Kelbeck to bounce your cards. You could just Contact C them, or even if they go for like they mill the Reno Heart and it comes back, you just go Contact C, and now if they want to send for a fusion, they're going to be stuck because Contact C will just sit there. And you'll basically force them to go in lines of play that they normally don't do. So that's why I have Contact C as my first of the pick five. And it's a very cheap card. I do think you can get the hollows if you want. You could do commons. So up to you. My next pick is going to actually be one that everyone kind of hates, but I think this card has a great place in the format, and that's obviously Dimension Shifter. Shifter is just fantastic. You drop it on the opponent, you can stop games, you can alter, the state of the game immediately on the first turn, which is pretty busted. Or if you want to hold it and wait till your opponent starts to commit, like say your opponent goes into a summon of a monster, like the tier cards, and they start to mill, you can just immediately fire it off, and then, well, there you go. Point is, Shifter is an amazing card. It's here basically just because I look at it as a card that people can use, and if you really want to take advantage of a decent card, you can build around it, you can play with it. It is fantastic in that aspect. It's cheap commons from the structure deck, Prismatic Seeker if you want, Ultra from the tins. Point is, Shifter is great, and that's why it's number 2. Number 3 for my pick 5 is actually a pretty interesting one, and that's going to be Herald of the Abyss. So I have Herald of the Abyss here because I think this is one of those tech cards that it doesn't get the respect it deserves for what it is, and it's absolutely amazing. So for Herald of the Abyss, what you do is you pay 1,500 life points, and then you're able to declare a type and an attribute of a monster. So once Herald of the Abyss is basically used, you call out usually whatever your opponent has, and they're forced to send it to the grave. So the reason that I have Herald of the Abyss here is that it's one of these cards where it jumps in and out of formats where sometimes people tech it, some people just don't really think it's that usable because they don't like the fact that they have to either pay the life points or have to effectively just kind of waste doing that to get rid of a card. But one thing I really like about Herald of the Abyss is that it has the lock effect for the rest of the turn. Your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters with the sent monster's name. So what this means is Herald of the Abyss is basically designed to stall out against other decks because it is effectively like Call by the Grave, but in a better way that you don't have to let the card hit the grave. You can just deal with whatever the threat is, and the threat is basically stopped until, for the rest of the turn. So if there is a card that like had an effect that would trigger, it's not going to be able to trigger. So this is kind of like I actually have this as my tech for against Unchained specifically, so that if my opponent decides to get up the Soul of Rage for whatever reason before they can get my monsters out, I'll just drop this, get rid of the Soul of Rage, and then some people are like, oh, I'll just reborn it. And I'm like, yeah, sure, you can just reborn the card, but you can't activate the effects of the monster. So what was the point of bringing it back? So, there's just those little instances that people don't pay attention with Herald of the Abyss. It's pretty cheap, you don't have to go too crazy on it, and it's a very good card, so I would people to try it out, see if you like it. I like Herald of the Abyss. It's not for every format, though, because, people can respond to it, they can dodge their cards, but the point is, yeah, it's a good card. Next, I actually have Ice Dragon's Prison. So, Ice Dragon's Prison is a pseudo-tech against a few decks, mostly for Unchained, as it allows you to kind of deal with their cards on the field due to its effective summon stuff. And you can snipe out cards from the grave, so you can just take it away from them. The reason I picked Ice Dragon specifically was just that it really allows you to catch most decks off guard. That's one of the things that makes Ice Dragon's Prison just a little bit more unique, is that unlike with the other decks in the format, the Ice Dragon's Prison allows you to kind of take advantage if they're not paying attention, or maybe they're not expecting it, so it allows you to deal and clear stuff. So one thing that's interesting is that I think in Purely and in Rescue Ace, the matchup, this card is a little bit more powerful, in that when you target one of their monsters, you special summon it back, you can banish the one. So basically you could stop Hydrants, you can stop in Purely, you can stop the Purely, you can go after that. Sometimes if you're in a grind game and for whatever reason there may be a Turbulence in the grave, bring it back, get rid of another Turbulence. You're starting to see the point. It allows you to deal with threats in decks that maybe they weren't prepared for that. They're not expecting it. So yeah, that's why I have Ice Dragon's Prison here. My final one's actually going to be one I think is just really good for right now. But I think once Age of Overlord drops, I would really rethink this, and that's going to be Gos and Match. So I have Gos and Match here as the last card, based solely on the fact that it's good going into your deck, and it's good going against other decks. So what I mean by this is if you can build your strategy around one typing of the attributes, or focus on just ending your board with one attribute, Gos and Match is amazing because many decks are multi-attribute now, at least for, at the moment. So a good example of this would be if you know you're playing against Purely and you're playing Rescue Ace, you could use this. Some of the budget decks I recommend, a lot of them are different attributes, so they kind of get stuck, but one of my favorite ones is actually Salamangreat. I think that deck can use Gos and Match pretty well, especially with the new support. It just has to really focus on just going into fires. But Gos and Match is here because defensively, it's really powerful in that a lot of decks, depending on what you're playing against, they have different attribute end boards. So, I thought about this being a really good tech against something like Unchained, where you can lock them into a specific attribute at the right time, because they don't necessarily have a corresponding attribute to respond with in their links, and vice versa. Some decks have the same problem. So you go ahead and flip up something like, what's this example? Oh, yeah. If you flip up something against like a Flandreese player, usually goes and doesn't really do too much, but I did see in certain matchups, it depends on their combo lines, where I watched my friend who's playing Branded Chimera actually flip this up on them, and I couldn't believe it because I was like, I thought that was absolutely crazy, but it actually worked. It actually paid off in slowing them down. So it's one of those instances where these cards have their own usages against certain decks, but you have to time it. So that's why I think for this format specifically, that's only about to be about a month. I think Gozen's actually pretty good because it can cover a lot of decks, and it really allows you to stop certain ones. So yeah. But yeah, one of the big reasons I think Gozen's really good just right now is how I think it helps most decks deal with the Unchained matchup, because a lot of decks I think weren't prepared for it and they struggle. But against Unchained, Gozen helps out a lot because what it basically allows you to do is if you know that they're going to go for their normal pops and their normal effects to get cards out, what you're basically allowed to do is if they're going straight for the Aruha and they go ahead and pop the card, immediately you just, throw up, no pun intended, you throw up the Gozen, and basically their lines look really bad because all they have left really is Sharvara, and they're going to be stuck because, the rest of the Unchained monsters happen to be water, dark, and all the Link monsters are actually dark monsters, so they would have to be playing like a specific like tech out, and at this moment the only really one is like Phoenix. So unless they're running Phoenix, they're not really going to do anything with it. So yeah, and they get locked into Fiends, so just something to be a little bit more prepared for, I guess, guys. Like, just expect it because, Nightmare Phoenix is a Fiend, so that's like their one out. But I've seen a lot of lists, they don't necessarily play Phoenix. They rather have like just, they're Unchained monsters, and they want to focus on getting out their bosses. So yeah, just letting you guys know as a tidbit. But yeah, goes and stops them. Yeah, and that's my first pick 5, guys. I want this to be quick. Didn't want to go too far into detail because I do have a lot I could say. But point is, these are my top 5 picks for at least right now for this format. It's going to be a small format, nothing too crazy. You guys might already have most of these cards, and if you don't, I think they're worth picking up. They're very budget friendly. And yeah, that's all I've got today. If you disagree, leave a comment, like. You agree, leave a comment, leave a like. Point is, just interact with me, guys. We're building the community. And yeah, that's it. So, as always, I'm Brad from the Ed Army, signing off. And for all of you out there to sign on.